Yeah, go for it.
Welcome everyone to Know Your MIP number 6. My name is Juan and I'm here joined by a bunch of people interested by Maker. Today we're going to be covering MIP number 49. So it's Maker tokens in governance and rewards about it. So I'm going to give the floor to Prost 11 that's going to tell us more about this.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to get the platform here to present. I think I'm going to share my screen. I put together just a few slides for you here. Yeah, so governance rewards, MIP number 49. Here to tell you what it's all about, how it works, and maybe we can have a nice discussion in terms of questions about it, opinions, that sort of thing. So I guess fundamentally, the motivation for governance rewards is to help secure the Maker protocol. Basically, the more MKR tokens that are out there and available to be borrowed, it presents a potential attack vector on the protocol, especially relative to how much MKR we currently have securing the hat. Basically, if you could borrow a bunch more than that, it wouldn't be too hard to put your own executive through. And obviously there's a lot of problems with that. It also has some nice benefits though, in terms of like using governance rewards as an incentive to counteract that. For instance, it will hopefully encourage participation in governance. Like now you have a reason you would have a reason to lock your MKR in governance and hopefully therefore use it in voting. Also enables dividends, a different form of share appreciation of basically allowing the MKR investment to pay off other than the buyback and burn model. So in terms of this MIP in particular, it specifies very few things. It's basically setting up the avenue for governance rewards. Sam, Hexanaut on the forums, he's put together some code that's kind of based off of Uniswap's LP and how they were rewarding uni tokens for people that had tokens staked essentially on their platform. So that's one avenue to go. Like right now, that kind of seems like the avenue we might want to pursue if this were to be passed. But this MIP in particular was written to be very general and to allow us to upgrade and change the governance rewards path as it goes. So in particular, the only thing this MIP specifies is that the rewards must be paid out in DAI. The staking for the rewards are opt-in, and overall, it's based on the kind of surplus revenue. Profit is a good way to like think of it, but it's basically money that otherwise would have been going towards the buyback and burn. So that's not necessarily profits, but it's excess revenue when the surplus buffer is full. So basically, revenue that is not currently going to expenses. It does recommend that incentive structure be aligned with market liquidity, and that the idea is that if there's more MKR available to borrow on the open market in places like Aave, we should probably have a slightly higher reward in order to entice more MKR over to us. But that is up to whatever proposal would be put forth following this.
Those is the like how is it measured? Or I'm guessing this would be done like by a smart contract. So how would we measure how much Maker is outstanding in the market to be able to change this parameter?
Sure. Yeah, that's a bit of a complicated question because I guess there are a few different ways you could measure it off of. But if you notice, whenever you go to vote on like an executive, it does show you like the amount of MKR that's currently available over at like Aave and Balancer. So it would be pretty easy to base it on a feed like that if you wanted to. But I guess I wouldn't necessarily want to make a specific recommendation on how you're basing off the liquidity, only that the more liquidity, the higher the rewards in theory would need to be in order to secure the platform. So basically this sets it up, says, hey, your proposal should think about this and possibly have some mechanism that ties it to the liquidity. That's what's encouraged here, but not enforced. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Are there any other questions for pros at this point, or everything's clear? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about why is it opt-in instead of just giving to everyone who's taking it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in theory, depending on your jurisdiction, obviously we don't know what every MKR holder's situation is, but the distribution of these, they essentially are dividends. So that could act as a taxable event for most people. Obviously, do your own research, find your own tax things, but it's opt-in because some people may not wish to create that taxable event for themselves.
Is there a future roadmap for this whereby any of that distribution would be, instead of paid and die, allocated or put together some type of smart contract to have it be converted into MKR to lock it back in the same contract so that you're in effect doubling down on your existing governance and you whatever your tax liability is, you pay it yourself off to the side?
That is like a possible path forward. This doesn't make any recommendations specifically towards that. But for instance, let's say we allow governance rewards and there's a program in place. It would then be pretty easy to build a smart contract that does that very thing and would allow further people to opt into it. I imagine that would be pretty well liked or pretty well desired by the community. So I don't think that would be too hard to make happen, but this wouldn't lay out any of the necessities to make it happen, I guess.
To add to that, there's a pretty healthy conversation when Sam introduced the technical part of this before it became a MIP. And that was one of those discussions. I think it went into a couple of different angles, but I mean, I believe it's basically like whatever the reward mechanism would be can be set by governance. So if they want to change it, they can do that.
Absolutely. I was just pulling up this, sorry.
I guess as an American, I really like it. This is like a huge difference for us as maker holders. Like, I wonder if, that's being taken fully into consideration, because like it's a 30% difference in tax rates. And it's also, it takes away the ability to defer that taxable event and makes it immediate. So, I mean, it has like a double compounding effect on your ultimate returns.
But if you're paid and die directly, you could just keep 30 or 40% of what you receive and allocate it to the government, right? It's in some argument just found money, no?
Say that again, Matt?
It's to some element, it's just, quote, found money. I mean, if you've got whatever MKR you've got it locked in a governance contract, and I'm just making up a random number, and 1,000 DAI is allocated to you for this governance reward, and it shows up in your wallet. I mean, it's your conscious decision to then probably need to take 30 or 40% of that, send it to the government, to the IRS, and the rest of it, the entire 1,000 was found up until that point.
So I mean, are you saying that it would have to be an immediate event, or are you saying you could potentially defer?
I'm saying that it would be in that regard, if you chose to make it an immediate event, getting $1,000 and having to pay tax on it is better than not getting $1,000 and paying tax on zero.
Or getting $1,000 passed to you via, the current mechanisms.
Correct. No. I'm personally, I like the current mechanism because of its tax advantages.
I mean, the kind of counterpoint is that you wouldn't get the $1,000 with the current mechanism because it's split between way more people, right? Like that would only be an issue if like literally all of the maker was in the contract and getting those rewards.
Yeah, that's a good point in that it's specifically diverting funds that otherwise would be going to buy back and burn. So unless you were like selling your MKR, which would also be a taxable event, you wouldn't really be able to take advantage of that, I guess. But tax implications are pretty heavy. That is definitely one of the major downsides and risks to this proposal. And I guess I'm kind of the opinion that the tax, I don't know, obstacles or the downside to the taxation is worth dealing with in order to help secure the protocol, with the idea being that this will encourage more MKR to be deposited in governance and hopefully keep it safer than it would be without it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess my point there is like, where can we find that balancing line? Like, what's the minimum level of rewards you could do to incentivize what you want to happen without destroying the tax benefits of the current system?
Yeah, I would be further on that is that I would say the tax benefits, the way the system is presently designed was, if I understand it correctly, was structured around being exceptionally tax efficient in not distributing cash, but having the value be buy, burn, destroy, turn into capital gains. The whole system, it potentially turns into a slippery slope of, well, instead of doing buy and burn, let's just deliver all the cash to everybody. And then all of a sudden everybody finds themselves saying, well, we won't do any more burn. We'll just distribute the cash. And you took a huge strategic advantage and just eroded it.
Yeah, it's definitely less efficient if you deliver or if you transmit all the rewards this way, right? I don't think anyone's arguing that.
But isn't this the same? Sorry,
go ahead, Frank. Sorry, no, go ahead. Frank.
This is the same case though for source credit. As an American myself, when I get source credit, I have to put 40% aside already. So, so what you guys are saying, what Matt and Greg, what you guys are saying is that it's better to get MKR as opposed to DAI?
No, and that's not that. It's that under the current setup right now, forget any any distribution of profit right now. The buy and burn model indirectly benefits any current MKR holder by, in effect, deferring. So if you own, just pick a random number, 100 MKR, and you own 100 and 10 years goes by and you still own 100, the amount outstanding, assuming that we do good loans, the amount of burn happens, therefore the circulating supply goes down. Your 100 MKR, the quantity didn't change, but the value should have market appreciated as that value was indirectly given to you by a stock buyback. So whenever you go to sell that MKR in the future, not only have you deferred all the gains, but you never had taxation during that framework because nothing was ever delivered to you directly. It's very tax efficient in that way. The source cred stuff, you're right, it's the same model. And whether or not you receive DAI or MKR using this MIP, you'd have taxation every single year as opposed to being able to defer it.
Right, but I think the motivation here is that incentives, right? I think the community has been asking for that. And you see other communities doing it and it's worked for them. I mean, Synthetics they've done a magical job of incentivizing their community. So I think this is the reason why this MIP was put forward. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, it could work that way, right? Over the next 10 years and it becomes a long-term capital gain as opposed to a short-term, but assuming we do governance correctly.
Matt, your ideal situation would be that anyone staking their maker in governance would get like a buyback or like a buyback and burn before the rest of the maker holders that are potentially not staking their maker. Is that your ideal solution for this?
I wish I had a good solution. I think some of it may turn into a recommendation of almost an option in the future to mint MKR to be bought at a certain price as a way to do rewards that may be more tax efficient, but I'm not a tax guy totally, so I wouldn't say that's better or worse yet.
Long, you were going to say something?
Yeah, nothing important. We can probably carry on.
Yeah, well, I think Matt's really highlighting the fundamental governance question that's at play here with this MIP is, is this a method that will provide enough security to make that dilution worth it, or to make that inefficiency worth it? And I would like to think so, but like I think it's a very worthy discussion to have, because obviously if the protocol is not safe, then the MKR isn't worth anything anyway. But if you have to completely destroy its value just to keep it alive, that's not doing great either. Yeah, so the only thing I didn't get to with the previous slide was that basically the MIP itself also describes kind of a 6-week RFC period for any governance rewards proposals. And the idea there that means we've got about a month and a half on any change, any new first implementation or any changes thereafter. The thought there being that gives the community plenty of time for both feedback and a chance to really vet some of the ideas in terms of the incentives that someone might want to author.
Pros, potentially any type of implementation would have to be chosen or implemented through a sub-proposal, right? So any type of parameters, percentages, or mechanisms would all have to be described in the sub-proposal.
Correct. And yeah, and basically this MIP just lays out a way to do that through this MIP. So through those kind of limited, has to be opt-in, has to be in DAI, and has to be based on the surplus revenue. If you wanted to distribute rewards a different way, you would basically have to propose an entirely new MIP. So the idea is this, in theory, should be slightly quicker than that, but still provide enough time for the community to thoroughly vet and engage with the ideas that might be brought because of this proposal.
I do have one question, and if it starts dragging on too long, just cut me off. But
No,
it's not trying to hijack the notion of this. But what I mentioned about 3 minutes ago, something to entertain. Like, what if instead of just delivering cash as a percentage of opt-in or profits or whatever, that the time that you had your MKR locked up and the amount of MKR you had locked up, in effect, gave you or granted the maker token holders an option to purchase MKR, newly minted MKR, at whatever discount to the then market based upon that time frame. It would also be tax deferred, would also present an alignment of making sure it stays in with in alignment with staying within the ecosystem. It's just something to think about. There may be another angle to do this that also presents some of the same benefits, but doesn't have the tax drawback.
Yeah, that's potentially not a bad idea. I think it'd be more complicated from a smart contracts perspective. But yeah.
After seeing what Maker can do with multiple CDPs and loans, I'm no longer convinced that complexity is the challenge. It's just our imagination.
I mean, it's a short-term challenge. I agree. It's not something can't be overcome. It's more just like you should divert some resource to build that, right?
Yeah, in terms of resources to build and then to send out, but I do like that idea. I
mean, startups have been using options for decades to incentivize staff. This may be another mechanism.
Yeah, certainly. I guess there's some question then, do you want the options to be directly tied to actual on-chain voting, or are there other governance actions that you might want to incentivize with those as well? I guess this kind of narrowly focuses on the idea of getting more MKR on the hat and whether or not this would be an efficient way to go about doing that.
To me, I would bifurcate those points. I mean, to me, that's a question of what you do with, how do you get MKR to be in the hat on the first place? And then who should get the value, whether or not it's DAI or MKR, and the second place about how it was created. You know, if we're going to incentivize voting, do we make it that they voted on the recent hat or just voted in general? there, you can, is it based on polling? Do people just vote on whatever the hell the majority is, and that gets them a reward?
So
Right, those are,
yeah, you
go
go
ahead, Long,
first.
sorry. I was just going to say, yeah, those are definitely some of the problems with it. One kind of cool thing is for the upcoming DSS Gov. Obviously, we don't know for sure how that's going to work, but based on the documentation they provided, there is going to be like an active and inactive MKR within the HAT system. So that might provide a very easy way to distribute these governance rewards. If, again, someone saw fit to that.
Yeah, that's correct, Peyton. I mean, what you're talking about there is the snapshotting. So you identify and be able to set a period of time that MKR is deemed active or inactive based on a user's participation. And then we also need to start looking at delegation and how do we reference activeness based on delegates. Not only delegates, but also the individuals that have forwarded their MKR to the delegate. Because they're still helping support the HAT, of course, by putting their MKR in the system. So yeah, we need to discuss that and understand how that'll work, or how this will work as a module, as a modular component to that DSS Gov system. Jumping off the back of what Matthew was saying, I'm also not a tax guy, but it seems similar to you could always put rewards into like some sort of an expiry limited pool and have people redeem like they do today for airdrops. I'm not sure what the tax implications of that is, but like what Tornado Cash or Uniswap have done, where you have to call the pool to redeem tokens from it. I don't know. I mean, technically it's not challenging, but if that could play a component to this as well. And then also, I guess off the back of that, we should probably do some analysis on how much do we expect to be paying out, and also what would be the equivalent cost to cover fees for all the voting, and just like as a measure of comparison against that to have the discussion of what's more favorable to people covering costs and rewards. So yeah, I'm going on a tangent there, but a few things come to mind.
No, I think those are some really excellent points. So that initial post that did inspire this MIP, Sam's kind of code and contract that he's been working on, I believe it does work in a similar way to that with the Uniswap pools. I don't know if it's like from a tax advantage. I don't know if because you have the ability to claim them, it might be treated the exact same way. Again, that would probably need to be like a tax professional that can answer that for you. But I know that was part of the design choice for Sam's implementation. And I guess the idea behind this MIP in general is to kind of pave the way for those ideas to come through. So if this were to be passed, then Sam could float his implementation as an idea, say it's this much based on this, and then the community would debate those parameters.
I believe it's important to try to understand what we're trying to solve, right? If it's protecting the system from an attack or reducing the amount of outstanding maker in the market, that's one thing. If it's voting and active participation is another thing. So once we can solve for that, potentially we can look for what's the best solution, balancing, and anything that has to do with tax implications and whatnot. But it seems that we are trying multiple solutions for multiple problems at the same time, and that might not be ideal.
Yeah, I guess fundamentally, right, the problem is that right now there are places where you can store, where you can lend your MKR and get yield on it. The governance contract is not one of those places. So MKR holders are financially incentivized to keep their MKR outside of our system, and that puts our system at risk. Is this the best way to deal with that? Like, I honestly don't know, but I think this is a pretty intelligent start in that it kind of lays limitations that says, okay, if we're going to experiment with governance rewards, it should be tied to these things. And we should be aware of these risks that I have on the screen, because certainly proposals that could do that could come forth once we allow an avenue for them to be proposed.
On that note, I know someone is like one of the MKR like holders have told me, you know, if you're yield farming on it, you're still going to get like 30%. So if we're trying to be competitive to some of those yield farming, like if we say we're not going to go that high, I think that the idea that we're trying to stay competitive for people not to lend elsewhere is kind of a tough like reasoning, right? If we're saying, oh, yield farming is 30% or something. So I worry if that is actually solving the problem, or like this approach is actually going to the core of that.
Yeah, that is definitely a good point, because if we're trying to compete with like 30% yields, like there's no way it would break the MKR system. However, I do think about it like in terms of just like the fact that you can generate a few percent just for depositing it over at Aave, for instance, even if you don't collateralize the position. So we're kind of, in my mind, attacking more of the lower risk strategies for generating yield, and kind of tying it more to the idea again of dividends, of it being tied to protocol performance. So in theory, if you're voting for better things, if you're participating in governance, and that's resulting in more revenue, more profits, then in theory your token would be allowing you a piece of that appreciation.
Sounds good. I don't know any of the comments in the chat. I think it's a quite interesting discussion if you want to jump in. So it's recorded for the YouTube viewers. Okay, I could.
Yeah, you want to summarize it, Juan? I can.
So we could potentially record the chat, Greg, but that's not the point. Yeah, so one of the, I don't know, there are different things being thrown as ideas. One of them is snapshotting any type of wallet and then vote with that, even if it's locked in some pool. And yeah, another idea was to set a limit at 5%, but then potentially maker holders could change that 5% to make it more competitive, as Amy was saying. So that might be opening the box of Pandora right there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know if anyone else has a comment or question for pros.
Yeah, no, that snapshot shot, whatever the hell it's called, I use it for balancer and what have you, wifey, and it's a lot different than what Maker MKR is intended for, right? We all know that it's there to protect the system. It's a backstop for the system, for the Maker protocol. So yeah, it just wouldn't work, and I'm sure Derek would say the same, right, Derek? I mean, I'm pretty sure you looked at that option. It just doesn't work for Maker.
But yeah, that's what I was saying. If we're trying to keep Maker from going out in the market, this would not work. But if we're trying to encourage participation, even doing, I don't know, or giving out tokens that are just used for voting in some L2, it's probably the best solution, right? Then gas would be virtually free, and potentially people could vote without moving their tokens. So that's why if we know which problem we're trying to solve, it will be much easier to debate a solution.
Yeah, I think it kind of ripples out into many different areas, which makes it really difficult, right? There are a lot of reasons why you could oppose governance rewards, and the reason for supporting it, I guess they're also varied, but in general, they're either protocol safety or other people are doing it, so we should too. Which one of those is very important, the other one probably not so much.
Or anyone,
yeah. Go ahead,
probably
Paul.
will not take it personal if he votes against this MIP. So don't worry.
Yeah, and like, please like publicly disagree with it too. I think that's really valuable. I guess, yeah, because that is the problem it's trying to solve is protocol safety. So if a better solution were to come out through that discourse, that's even better in my opinion.
Just out of from a governance perspective, where is this MIP in the whole cycle of things? Because it sounds like we really need to get some consensus somewhere before spending the engineering resources. It kind of taps into a broader issue of everybody's got lots of ideas. There's no shortage of ideas in the community, and it's shortage of execution that comes around to be the constraint. And before I would definitely want to make sure we really have people on board before we start getting teams to develop this.
It's in RFC, so some of the conversation we've had today would probably be like incredibly useful, just articulating the different trade-offs, because it seems like a Venn diagram and it's like it's convex decision, but then this other vector comes in and you're like, wait, what about this part? And I think that there's a few different decisions and debates that need to happen. Like Juan's 100% right. It's like, which problem is it trying to solve? Because it seems like it's trying to solve two, but then when you unpack it, it actually might be a little bit more.
And Matt, just to complement Tim's answer, I think that Sam, and Pros, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he has coded most of it. And so I'm not sure if it would be optimizing anything at this point. It's more of, do we like the idea and the execution or not?
Yeah, that was essentially the ideas Sam posted originally to the forum with a version of his code, a version that could go forward for governance rewards. So a MIP would need to kind of accompany that. So I drafted this MIP that would kind of be the guiding rails if we were to implement a governance rewards program. So this passing doesn't mean Sam's version would pass. This would just basically allow a pathway for Sam's or a different version to be put forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. So we also have a lot of community members, right, that probably are anonymous, and they probably could care less about incurring a taxable event. So yeah, you guys are right. I mean, a lot of people need to chime in.
So yeah, Amy's saying on the chat that potentially this would come after the keg, which would come after liquidations 2.0. So there's still some road to go, I guess, even for reviews and audits and whatnot. And they're exciting real world assets as well. So I guess MIP 21 and 22 would go first. So that's good. It gives us a lot of time and leeway to discuss potential solutions and better tackle this problem. Any other questions or comments, ideally on the mic, before we close the discussion?
So a couple of people earlier were talking about not being sure what this is aimed to solve. I think it's like the kind of goal is fairly clear, to ensure that there is, or to essentially move Maker off the lending market and into the governance contract. A couple of people mentioned voting, but this isn't actually, like, the incentives aren't linked to voting in any way in this, right? It's literally just as long as it's in the governance contract, it would get the rewards, which kind of sidesteps the issues around how you reward voting, because it gets complicated then. But so for reference, like there's like 20,000 Maker on Aave, which gets like 0.13%, right? And it's still on Aave. And there's like no yield farming or anything on that, right? If we can, so I did some like napkin calculations, right? If you divert like 5% of the burn to the gov rewards, and there's like 50,000 MKR in the governance contract, then it's like 3% or something APR for that, for the holders of that Maker. So even if that doubles to like 100,000 Maker, it's still then like 1.5%, which is still higher than what it is on Aave. Like there isn't that much like natural lending, like borrowing demand for Maker under normal circumstances, so the APR is low. Like absent of late yield farming, it's probably would make more sense with this system to have the MKR in the Maker governance contract rather than on lending platforms.
Right, but that's what Amy was saying, that if potentially you want to yield farm, what you would do is you would lend your maker at Aave and then borrow whatever token is in fashion to go and yield farming. So you're not really looking at the 1.6% and you're not really competing with that. You're competing with the whole mechanism behind it, right?
Sure, yeah. If you want to use Maker as capital, then yeah, you I guess would use Aave or something similar.
I was trying to think on Matt's idea, like if you could have like a pool, kind of like a priority pool where you would burn before. But I don't know if it makes sense, because then you would potentially distribute the maker that you just bought from the burn, so that would not work, I guess. Like there's no way of burning this maker, so you would have to do something with options or something like that, a little bit more creative, I guess.
Yeah, you can't use the burn mechanism to reward parts of the token base, right? It's all or nothing. That's the downside with it. So yeah, as I said, so like the main idea behind this was that, but there are some like side benefits which people were discussing, which are mainly that it helps defray the costs for voting for those who are active in governance. It reduces the barrier of entry for governance, because if you already have Maker locked in the governance contract, then it's relatively easy to then vote. And there's one more, which I've forgotten. Yeah, whatever, it'll come back to me. Yeah, so essentially there are side benefits as well as the main benefit, but I think the main benefit is to try and help secure the protocol.
Any comments before we call it an evening, a day, a morning?
Just very quickly going back to what Matt said a while ago about whether people like which benefit that we want, like which benefit or what problem we're trying to solve, and just trying to get maybe a signal on one of the other two, because I feel like we're trying to optimize for all of it. So maybe there's like, you know, people actually want it more for the reward side, and someone wants us, actually they want to care more about security side. That would also help us solve closer to the problem, since we have lots of time before, even if this was going to go into a MIP for it to build anyway. So maybe having that as like a little poll that would help us get to a better solution.
We'll get Governance Alpha to work on it then.
Yeah, I know a few of those guys, so we'll talk to them.
Sounds good. All right, bros. So where can people learn more about this and potentially voice their strong opinions?
Head on to the forum. Like I said, this is MIP number 49, Governance Rewards. So you can search any part of that. It should pop right up for you, and kind of exchange on the discourse there. I know a bunch of you I've already seen on there. So thank you for that participation. And any particular comments about editing sections, adding new thoughts, like that would be great, because it is in its RFC period for at least a little while longer here. And if there are any edits I can make to make this a better proposal, I'd love to do that. So thanks.
Thanks everyone for coming, especially the loud and contrary opinions. I think we really enjoy them, and it only makes us stronger. So thanks a lot.
And thank you for hosting, Peyton.
You're